The blood on Olivia Owens' hands had dried to a rust-colored crust by the time the last shovelful of dirt fell upon the third grave. The Montana Territory sun beat down mercilessly as she stood alone on the hillside, her tears carving clean trails through the dust on her cheeks. 3 wooden crosses stood as silent sentinels over the freshly turned earth her father, mother, and younger brother, all taken by the fever that had swept through their homestead with cruel efficiency. Spring of 1876 had brought both renewal to the land and death to her door. At 22, Olivia now found herself utterly alone, miles from the nearest town of Whispering Pines, with nothing but a half-built cabin, dwindling supplies, and the crushing weight of grief upon her shoulders. "I don't know what to do," she whispered to the graves, her voice breaking. The gentle prairie wind carried her words away, leaving only silence in response. The family had arrived from Pennsylvania just 8 months prior, full of hope and dreams of building a prosperous ranch in the West. Her father, Thomas Owens, had been so proud when they'd staked their claim, his eyes alight with visions of cattle grazing across their own land. Her mother, Sarah, had planted a small garden, already planning for the home they would build. And little James, only 16, had talked endlessly of becoming a true cowboy. Now they were gone, and the dream had died with them. Olivia sank to her knees between the graves, her dark brown hair falling in tangles around her face. The blue calico dress she wore, her only one not stained with the evidence of nursing the sick, was now smudged with dirt from the burial. She had no tears left, only a hollow emptiness that threatened to consume her. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Olivia finally rose. She couldn't stay here forever, though part of her wished she could. The half-finished cabin awaited her return, and decisions needed to be made. Practical concerns began to surface through her grief. She had maybe 2 weeks of supplies left. The nearest town was a full day's ride. And she had never been alone before, not truly. The walk back to the cabin seemed longer than it had that morning. Each step felt like moving through deep water, her limbs heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. When she finally reached the clearing where their homestead stood, she paused, taking in the scene with fresh eyes. The cabin was little more than a shell walls standing, but the roof only partially complete. Her father had been working on it when the fever struck. Their temporary shelter was a lean-to against one wall, where they'd been living while building. The garden her mother had so lovingly tended was already showing signs of neglect after just a week of illness. Olivia moved mechanically through the motions of survival, gathering water from the creek, building a small fire, forcing herself to eat a few bites of stale bread. As darkness fell, she huddled in the lean-to, wrapped in her mother's quilt, and stared into the dying embers of the fire. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered to the night. No one answered. Sleep eventually claimed her, a fitful respite from grief. When dawn broke, Olivia rose with new determination. She couldn't stay here alone, that much was clear. She would ride to Whispering Pines, sell what she could, and perhaps find work as a seamstress or in the general store. Her mother had taught her to sew finely, and her father had insisted she learn her numbers well. With trembling hands, she began gathering the few possessions worth taking: her mother's silver hairbrush, the family Bible, the quilt. Everything else would have to be left behind or sold. The thought of abandoning her family's dream tore at her heart, but she saw no alternative. As Olivia was securing her father's old saddlebags to their remaining horse, a cloud of dust on the horizon caught her attention. Her heart lurched with fear. In these parts, unexpected visitors were rarely welcome news. She hurried inside the lean-to and retrieved her father's rifle, loading it with shaking hands as the rider approached. The man who came into view was tall and broad-shouldered, sitting easy in the saddle of a magnificent chestnut stallion. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but as he drew closer, Olivia could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps in his late 20s. His clothing was that of a working cowboy, dusty, practical, well-worn. He reined his horse to a stop at a respectful distance and raised his hand in greeting. "Hello, the house," he called, his voice deep and clear in the morning air. Olivia stepped forward, rifle held ready but not aimed directly at him. State your business, she called back, trying to keep her voice steady. The man slowly removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and a face weathered by the elements but undeniably handsome. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, showed surprise at finding a woman alone. Name's Forrest McCall, madam. I work for the Triple R Ranch to the south. Mr. Richardson sent me to check on the Owens family after hearing about sickness in these parts. He glanced past her to the lean-to and unfinished cabin. Is Mr. Owens about? Olivia's grip on the rifle tightened as a fresh wave of grief washed over her. My father is dead, she said flatly. As are my mother and brother. The fever took them all within days of each other. Forrest McCall's expression shifted to one of genuine sympathy. He removed his hat and held it against his chest. I'm mighty sorry to hear that, Miss Owens. Truly I am. Thank you for your concern, Mr. McCall, but as you can see, there's nothing to be done here. Olivia's voice cracked despite her efforts to remain composed. Forrest dismounted slowly, still keeping a respectful distance. Pardon my asking, but do you have family nearby? Somewhere you can go? Olivia shook her head. No, we came from Pennsylvania. I was just preparing to ride to Whispering Pines to figure out what comes next. Forrest's gaze swept over the homestead, the unfinished cabin, the neglected garden, the 3 fresh graves visible on the hillside. His eyes returned to Olivia, taking in her exhausted state and the determination in her stance despite it all. Miss Owens, I don't mean to presume, but riding alone to town in your condition isn't safe. The trail's been known to have bandits and… He trailed off, seeming to choose his words carefully. Would you allow me to help? I could escort you to town or bring back supplies if you prefer to stay. Olivia studied him, searching for any sign of deception or ill intent. All she saw was honest concern in those blue eyes. Still, she had heard enough stories of women alone in the West to be cautious. Why would you help a stranger, Mr. McCall? A small smile touched his lips. Out here, neighbors look after neighbors, even when they're miles apart. Your father staked a legal claim. This land is yours now, and you have as much right to make a go of it as anyone. He paused. Besides, my mother would tan my hide if she knew I'd left a woman alone in your situation. Despite everything, Olivia felt a tiny smile tug at her lips. There was something reassuringly straightforward about this cowboy. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. That she is, Forrest agreed. He glanced at the sun. It's nearly noon. If we left now for town, we'd be riding after dark, which I don't recommend. Perhaps I could help with some work around here today, and we could head to town at first light tomorrow. Olivia hesitated. Having a stranger stay was improper, but so was abandoning everything her family had worked for without proper consideration. And the thought of another night alone with her grief was almost unbearable. There's work that needs doing, she admitted finally. The roof, for one. But I have little to offer in payment. Forrest waved away her concern. No payment necessary. Like I said, neighbors help neighbors. He secured his horse to a nearby post and removed his leather gloves. I'll take a look at that roof first, if you don't mind. Looks like rain might be coming in a few days. For the first time since the fever had struck, Olivia felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. She watched as Forrest assessed the cabin, his movements efficient and purposeful. There was something comforting about his capable presence. Thank you, Mr. McCall, she said quietly. He turned and tipped his hat with a small smile. Forrest, please, and you're welcome, Miss Owens. Olivia, she corrected, lowering the rifle at last. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Forrest worked tirelessly on the roof, using the materials her father had already gathered. Olivia found herself drawn into the rhythm of work as well, cleaning the lean-to and preparing a simple meal from her dwindling supplies. The physical labor provided a temporary respite from the crushing grief, giving her mind something to focus on besides loss. As dusk approached, Forrest had completed enough of the roof to make the main room of the cabin weatherproof. He built a small fire in the stone fireplace her father had constructed, and the dancing flames cast a warm glow over the rough-hewn walls. It's not finished, he said, wiping sweat from his brow, but it'll keep the rain out. We can do more tomorrow before heading to town if you'd like. Olivia nodded, surprised by how much they had accomplished in one afternoon. Thank you, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. They ate a simple supper of beans and the last of her bread, sitting on opposite sides of the fire. Forrest kept the conversation light, telling her about the Triple R Ranch where he worked and the town of Whispering Pines. Olivia found herself responding, even managing to share a few memories of her family without tears overwhelming her. As night fell completely, Forrest excused himself to sleep outside near his horse, despite Olivia's offer of the lean-to. "Wouldn't be proper," he said simply. "I've slept under the stars plenty of times." Alone in the lean-to, wrapped in her mother's quilt, Olivia found herself dwelling not on her losses but on the unexpected kindness of the cowboy who had appeared when she needed help most. For the first time in days, she slept without nightmares. Morning brought a new sense of purpose. Olivia awoke to find Forrest had already fetched water and rekindled the fire. They shared a breakfast of coffee and the last of her oats, then discussed plans for the day. "I've been thinking," Forrest said carefully. "There's no rush to decide what to do with your land. The Triple R has been looking for help. Mrs. Richardson needs assistance with the house, and they pay fair wages. You could work there while deciding what you want to do with your claim." Olivia considered his words. The thought of immediately abandoning her family's dream felt like a betrayal, but staying alone was impossible. "Would they truly hire me? I don't know them. Jacob Richardson is a fair man, and his wife is kind. They lost their daughter to the fever 2 winters ago, so they understand grief." Forrest paused, "And I'd vouch for you." The offer touched Olivia deeply. This man who barely knew her was willing to stake his reputation on her behalf. "I would be grateful for the opportunity," she said finally. With their plan decided, they spent the morning securing the cabin and gathering what Olivia would need. As she packed her few possessions, Olivia felt a strange mixture of sorrow and hope. When it came time to leave, she asked Forrest for a moment alone. She walked to the hillside where her family rested. Kneeling beside the 3 graves, she placed a wildflower on each mound of earth. "I have to go for now," she whispered, "but I'm not abandoning our dream. I'll come back when I can, I promise." When she returned to the cabin, Forrest was waiting patiently, both horses ready. He helped her mount her father's gelding, his hands strong and steady as he boosted her into the saddle. "Ready?" he asked, his blue eyes searching hers. Olivia took one last look at the homestead, then nodded. "Ready?" They rode south under the vast Montana sky, leaving behind 3 fresh graves but carrying with them the first tentative seeds of something new. The journey to the Triple R Ranch took most of the day. As they rode, Forrest pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory. Olivia found herself appreciating his easy manner and the way he spoke to her as an equal, not as someone to be pitied. "The Triple R isn't the biggest spread in these parts," he explained as they crested a hill in the late afternoon, "but it's well run. Jacob Richardson started with nothing 20 years ago. Now he runs nearly 2,000 head of cattle." Below them stretched a verdant valley, bisected by a silver ribbon of river. Nestled against the base of a gentle slope sat a collection of buildings, a large 2-story farmhouse, a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and several horses grazed in a corral near the barn. "It's beautiful," Olivia murmured, taking in the peaceful scene. "That it is," Forrest agreed, a note of pride in his voice. "Been working here 5 years now, started as just another cowhand but worked my way up to foreman last year." Olivia glanced at him with new appreciation. "Foreman? You didn't mention that." A slight flush colored his tan cheeks. "Didn't seem important at the time." As they approached the ranch, a woman emerged from the main house. Middle-aged with streaks of gray in her dark hair, she shaded her eyes against the setting sun as she watched their arrival. A moment later, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard joined her on the porch. "That's Mr. and Mrs. Richardson," Forrest explained as they rode into the yard. Jacob Richardson stepped forward as they dismounted. "Forrest, didn't expect you back so soon." His keen eyes moved to Olivia. "And who might this be, Mr. Richardson?" "This is Miss Olivia Owens. She's Thomas Owens' daughter from the homestead north of here." Forrest removed his hat respectfully. "I'm afraid I bring sad news. The fever took Mr. Owens and his wife and son." Martha Richardson gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, you poor dear," she said, immediately moving toward Olivia. "You must be exhausted. Come inside at once." Before Olivia could respond, she found herself ushered into the warmth of the farmhouse, Martha's arm around her shoulders. The older woman's kindness nearly undid her composure. After days of being strong alone, the simple human contact threatened to break the dam holding back her grief. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Inside, the house was comfortably furnished, not lavish, but with the accumulated comforts of a family who had prospered through hard work. Martha settled Olivia at the kitchen table and busied herself preparing tea while Jacob and Forrest followed behind. "Forrest has explained your situation," Jacob said, his voice gruff but kind. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need." "I don't want charity," Olivia said quietly but firmly. "Forrest mentioned you might need help with the house." "I can cook and clean, and my mother taught me fine needlework." Martha set a steaming cup of tea before her. "We do indeed need help. Our last girl left to get married 2 months ago, and I've been managing alone since. But that can wait until tomorrow. Tonight you rest." The genuine warmth in the Richardsons' welcome loosened something in Olivia's chest. For the first time since the fever had struck, she felt safe enough to truly grieve. To her mortification, tears began to slip down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, trying to wipe them away. "I don't mean to. Don't apologize for tears," Martha said gently, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "Jacob and I lost our daughter to the fever. We understand grief." At those words, the last of Olivia's resolve crumbled. Martha held her as she wept, years of motherly instinct evident in her soothing murmurs. Jacob and Forrest quietly excused themselves, leaving the women alone. Later, shown to a small but comfortable bedroom, Olivia fell into an exhausted sleep, emotionally drained but for the first time in days, not completely alone. The next morning, Olivia woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the past week came flooding back: the fever, the deaths, the graves, Forrest's unexpected appearance, and her arrival at the Triple R. A knock at the door roused her fully. "Miss Owens," Martha's voice called, "breakfast is ready whenever you are. Thank you." "I'll be right down," Olivia replied, hastily rising and donning the dress she'd worn yesterday, her only one besides the burial dress she couldn't bear to wear again. In the kitchen, Martha was frying bacon while Jacob and Forrest sat at the table, deep in discussion about cattle prices. Both men stood when Olivia entered, and Forrest pulled out a chair for her. "Good morning, Miss Owens. Hope you slept well," Jacob said, resuming his seat. "Better than I have in days, thank you," Olivia admitted, accepting a plate from Martha. As they ate, Martha outlined what help she needed: cooking, cleaning, mending, and assistance with the garden. The pay she offered was fair and included room and board. "And of course," Martha added, "you'll have time to ride out to your homestead regularly if you wish to maintain it." Olivia looked up, surprised. "You wouldn't mind?" "Of course not, dear. It's your land, your family's dream." Martha's eyes were kind. "Dreams shouldn't be abandoned lightly." Forrest cleared his throat. "I could ride with you when my duties allow. It's not safe for a woman alone on that trail." Jacob nodded approvingly. "Good idea, Forrest. In fact, why don't you take Miss Owens to town today? She'll need supplies, and I reckon some new clothes wouldn't go amiss." Martha beamed. "Excellent idea. I'll make a list." She bustled away to find paper and pencil. Alone with the men, Olivia felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "You're all being so kind, I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Jacob said gruffly. "You work hard, that'll be thanks enough." He rose from the table. "Forrest, take the wagon. More comfortable for the lady and room for supplies." After breakfast, Olivia found herself seated beside Forrest on the wagon bench, heading toward Whispering Pines. The morning was cool but promised warmth later, and the countryside was beautiful in the spring sunshine. "Thank you for suggesting I could keep the homestead," Olivia said after they had been traveling for a while. "I couldn't bear the thought of selling it, not yet." Forrest kept his eyes on the road, but she saw a small smile touch his lips. "Your father chose good land. Would be a shame to let it go." "Did you know him?" Olivia asked, realizing she knew nothing of Forrest's interactions with her family. "Met him twice." Once when he first came to stake his claim, he stopped at the Triple R for directions, then again in town a few months back. Forrest glanced at her. He spoke highly of you, proud of how you were adapting to frontier life. The knowledge that her father had spoken of her with pride brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes, but she blinked them away. Thank you for telling me that. They lapsed into comfortable silence until the town of Whispering Pines came into view. Unlike the rough frontier towns Olivia had imagined, it was a relatively orderly place, a main street lined with businesses, side streets with homes, and a small church with a white steeple. It's bigger than I expected, Olivia remarked as they drove down the main street. Growing every year, Forrest replied. The railroad's planning a spur line through here soon. Folks say the town might double in size within 5 years. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the general store. Mrs. Patterson runs this place. Fair prices, good quality, and she might know of a seamstress who could make you some new dresses quickly. The bell above the door jingled as they entered. The store was well stocked, shelves lined with goods from canned foods to tools, fabric to medicines. A plump, pleasant-faced woman looked up from behind the counter. Forrest McCall, haven't seen you in weeks. Her eyes moved to Olivia with undisguised curiosity. Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Olivia Owens. She's staying at the Triple R and needs to outfit herself. Her family's goods were lost to. Unfortunate circumstances. Understanding dawned in the shopkeeper's eyes. The fever, was it? I heard it hit some of the outlying homesteads hard. She came around the counter and took Olivia's hands in her own. I'm sorry for your troubles, Miss Owens. Now let's get you what you need. The next hour passed in a blur as Olivia selected necessities: undergarments, toiletries, a nightgown, and fabric for new dresses. Mrs. Patterson recommended a widow named Mrs. Chen who did fine sewing and could have 2 everyday dresses ready within days. She lives just behind the laundry, Mrs. Patterson explained. Her husband worked on the railroad before the accident. She's Chinese, but don't let that put you off. Her needlework is the finest in the territory. With Forrest's help carrying packages, they visited Mrs. Chen next. The small woman welcomed them into her neat home and took Olivia's measurements with efficient grace. Her English was accented but clear, and her eyes kind as she helped Olivia select patterns. By noon, they had completed most of their errands and stopped at the small hotel for lunch. As they ate, Forrest pointed out various townspeople, giving Olivia a sense of the community. That's Doc Wilson going into the apothecary, best physician for 100 miles, and the man tying his horse at the bank is Sheriff Taylor. Fair man doesn't take sides in range disputes. Olivia absorbed it all, grateful for Forrest's patient explanations. She had lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, but frontier life operated by different rules. Having someone to guide her through these unfamiliar waters was invaluable. As they prepared to leave town, Forrest suggested one more stop. I'd like to introduce you to Reverend Adams, if you don't mind. He holds services at the church each Sunday. The thought of attending church brought a pang of sadness. Sundays had been important to her mother, but Olivia nodded. I'd appreciate that. The Reverend was working in the church garden when they arrived. A man in his 50s with kind eyes and work-roughened hands, he greeted them warmly. Miss Owens, I'm truly sorry for your loss, he said after Forrest explained her situation. Please know you're welcome here any Sunday, and if you ever need to talk, my door is always open. Thank you, Reverend, Olivia said, touched by his sincerity. As they rode back to the Triple R in the late afternoon, the wagon loaded with supplies, Olivia felt a curious mixture of emotions. Grief still weighted her heart, but alongside it now was a tentative sense of possibility. The kindness shown by Forrest, the Richardsons, and the townspeople had given her something she had lost at those 3 gravesides: hope. She glanced at Forrest, who was focused on the road ahead, his profile strong against the backdrop of the Montana landscape. In just 2 days, this man had helped her begin rebuilding a life from the ashes of tragedy. There was something about his quiet strength that made her feel safe, even as everything around her had crumbled. Forrest, she said softly, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come looking for my family that day. He turned to her, his blue eyes serious. You'd have managed, Miss Olivia. "You're stronger than you know." The simple faith in his words warmed her more than she cared to admit. As the Triple R came into view, Olivia allowed herself to think that perhaps, someday, she might find happiness again. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that helped Olivia begin healing. Each morning, she rose early to help Martha with breakfast for the ranch hands. The days were filled with housework, gardening, and learning the rhythms of the ranch. In the evenings, she often sat on the porch with Martha, mending clothes or simply watching the sunset over the mountains. True to their word, the Richardsons arranged for Forrest to escort Olivia to her homestead once a week. These visits were bittersweet, the graves on the hillside a constant reminder of what she had lost, but the land itself still holding the promise of what could be on these trips. Forrest would work on the cabin while Olivia tended her mother's garden or cleaned the interior. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side with increasing comfort in each other's presence. By mid-June, the cabin was nearly complete. The roof was sound, the walls chinked against winter winds, glass installed in the window frames. Inside, Olivia had arranged the few pieces of furniture they'd brought from the Triple Artiquette storage barn: a table, chairs, a bed frame. "It's starting to look like a real home," Forrest remarked one afternoon as they stood in the doorway, surveying their work. "Yes," Olivia agreed softly. "Though I never imagined I'd be finishing it alone." Forrest's hand came to rest lightly on her shoulder. "Not alone," he said simply. She looked up at him, struck by the warmth in his blue eyes. Over the past weeks, something had shifted between them, a growing awareness that went beyond friendship or neighborly duty. Neither had spoken of it, but Olivia found herself increasingly conscious of his presence, the sound of his voice, the way his smile could brighten even her darkest days. "No," she agreed. "Not alone." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Forrest cleared his throat and stepped back. "We should head back soon. Looks like weather coming in." Indeed, dark clouds were gathering on the western horizon. They quickly secured the cabin and mounted their horses. The storm moved faster than expected, however, and they were only halfway back to the Triple R when the skies opened. "There's a line shack about a quarter-mile east," Forrest called over the drumming rain. "We can wait it out there." The small cabin was used by cowboys during the winter months when checking on distant herds. It was Spartan but dry, with a small stove, a rough-hewn table, and 2 narrow bunks. Forrest quickly built a fire while Olivia wrung water from her sodden skirts. "Your dress is soaked through," Forrest observed with concern. "There might be an old shirt in the trunk you could change into. You'll catch your death otherwise." Olivia hesitated only briefly before practical concerns overrode propriety. She found a faded flannel shirt and, with Forrest's back turned, changed quickly, hanging her dress near the stove to dry. The shirt hung nearly to her knees, the sleeves rolled up several times to free her hands. When she gave Forrest permission to turn around, his eyes widened momentarily before he quickly averted his gaze. A flush crept up his neck, and Olivia realized how improper the situation must appear alone in a remote cabin, her in men's clothing. "The rain's coming down too hard to travel," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Might be a few hours before it lets up." Olivia sat on one of the bunks, suddenly aware of how isolated they were. Not that she feared Forrest. In all their time together, he had never been anything but respectful. Still, she knew what people would say if they knew. "Tell me about your family," she said, seeking to ease the awkward tension. "You've mentioned your mother, but nothing else." Forrest relaxed visibly at the safe topic. He sat at the table, maintaining a proper distance between them. "Grew up in Missouri. Father was a blacksmith. Mother taught school before she married. I have 2 younger sisters, both married now with children of their own." "Why did you come west?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. A shadow crossed his face. "After the war, things were difficult. Father fought for the Union, came back changed. I needed space, I suppose." He looked up at her. "What about you? What brought your family west?" Olivia smiled sadly. "Father always dreamed of open spaces. He read dime novels about the West since I was a child. Mother thought he was chasing foolishness, but she loved him enough to follow." She paused. "They were married 25 years. I can't imagine how one survives without the other." They didn't have to, Forrest said quietly. The simple observation brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. No, they didn't, she wiped her cheeks. I'm sorry, you must think me terribly weak, crying all the time. Never, Forrest said with unexpected fierceness. Grief isn't weakness, Olivia, it's the price of having loved deeply. Something in his tone made her look at him sharply. You speak as though from experience. Forrest was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the fire. My wife, Eleanor, died in childbirth 6 years ago, our son with her. His voice was steady, but Olivia could hear the old pain beneath the words. That's why I came west. Couldn't bear to stay where everything reminded me of them. Oh, Forrest, Olivia breathed, her heart aching for him. I had no idea, he shrugged, a gesture that failed to mask the depth of his loss. Time dulls the sharpest edges, but you never forget. Impulsively, Olivia moved to sit beside him at the table, taking his hand in hers. Thank you for telling me. His fingers tightened around hers. I haven't spoken of them in years, but with you. He met her eyes. You understand loss. Yes, she whispered. I do. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside the small cabin, something fragile and new was taking root. They talked for hours, sharing memories both painful and precious, finding unexpected comfort in each other's understanding. When the rain finally stopped, late in the afternoon, they reluctantly prepared to leave. Olivia changed back into her now dry dress, and Forrest saddled the horses. The ride back to the Triple R was quiet, both lost in thought about what had been revealed in that small line shack. At the ranch, Jacob met them with obvious relief. Was getting worried. Storm was fierce. We waited it out in the East Line shack, Forrest explained, helping Olivia down from her horse. Something in their manner must have caught Jacob's attention, for his eyebrows rose slightly. But he said nothing, merely nodding and offering to stable Olivia's horse while she went inside to change. That evening, as Olivia helped Martha prepare supper, she found herself thinking of Forrest, not just his kindness or his help, but the man himself. His quiet strength, his gentle ways, the pain he carried, and the resilience with which he bore it. You're quiet tonight, Martha observed, kneading bread dough with practiced hands. Just thinking, Olivia replied, continuing to chop vegetables. Martha's knowing eyes studied her face. About Forrest, perhaps, Olivia's hand stilled. Is it that obvious? The older woman smiled. Only to someone who's been watching. He looks at you the way Jacob still looks at me after 30 years. He was married before, Olivia said softly. He lost his wife and child, Martha nodded. I know, it nearly destroyed him. When he first came to work here, he was like a man half dead himself. She dusted flour from her hands. But these past weeks, there's been a light in his eyes again, because of you, I think. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. We've only known each other a short time. Some hearts recognize each other instantly, Martha said simply. Others take years. There's no proper timeline for love. Love. The word hung in the air between them, both terrifying and exhilarating. Was that what she was feeling? It seemed impossible too soon after her loss, too quick to form such a profound attachment, and yet, I don't know what I feel, Olivia admitted. Everything is still so raw. Martha patted her hand, leaving a smudge of flour. There's no rush, dear. Just know that whatever happens, Jacob and I consider you family now. Your happiness matters to us. The words brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. That night, lying in bed, Olivia thought of Forrest's confession in the line shack. He had trusted her with his deepest pain, and in doing so, had helped her begin to face her own. Perhaps that was the beginning of healing, finding someone who understood the darkness and walked beside you toward the light. July brought scorching heat to the Montana territory. The days stretched long, filled with endless chores as the ranch prepared for the fall cattle drive. Olivia settled into life at the Triple R, her grief still present but no longer all-consuming. Her friendship with Forrest deepened with each passing day. Their weekly trips to her homestead continued, and occasionally they would ride into town together for supplies. People had begun to take notice of their companionship, but the Richardsons' obvious approval kept gossip to a minimum. One Sunday after church, Reverend Adams invited them to stay for the community picnic on the church grounds. Families spread blankets under shade trees, Children played tag between the gravestones, and tables groaned with potluck offerings. Olivia, wearing one of her new dresses, a light blue calico that Martha said matched her eyes, found herself introduced to what seemed like the entire town. Everyone was welcoming, though she noticed many curious glances exchanged when Forrest stayed steadfastly by her side. "People are talking about us," she murmured as they filled their plates. Forrest's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Let them talk. Nothing improper about two friends enjoying a church picnic. Friends." The word both comforted and disappointed her. Were they just friends? The question had been occupying her thoughts increasingly of late. They found a spot beneath an old oak tree, somewhat removed from the main gathering. As they ate, Olivia noticed a young woman watching them from across the churchyard, her expression decidedly unfriendly. "Who is that?" she asked Forrest, discreetly indicating the woman. Forrest glanced over and his expression tightened slightly. "Rebecca Simmons, daughter of the bank owner." Something in his tone made Olivia look at him more closely. "You know her well," he shrugged uncomfortably. She made it known she was interested in me last year. I wasn't receptive. "I see," Olivia said, a curious mixture of relief and amusement flooding her. "And now she's not pleased to see you with me." "You're imagining things," Forrest muttered, but his ears had turned red. Before Olivia could tease him further, Rebecca herself approached, her yellow dress rustling importantly. "Forrest McCall, you've been avoiding me," she said, ignoring Olivia completely. Forrest stood politely. "Miss Simmons, I've been busy at the ranch, too busy to accept dinner invitations." She pouted prettily, finally deigning to notice Olivia. "And who is this?" "Olivia Owens," he replied. "Miss Owens, this is Rebecca Simmons." Olivia rose and extended her hand. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Simmons." Rebecca barely touched her fingers before turning back to Forrest. "Father is hosting a dance next Saturday evening. I expect to see you there." With that, she swept away, her skirts swishing dramatically. Forrest sank back onto the blanket with a groan. "That woman is persistent." Olivia couldn't help but laugh at his discomfort. "She's pretty," she observed neutrally. "Pretty doesn't make up for a mean spirit," Forrest replied promptly. Then, as if realizing how revealing the comment was, he busied himself with his food. The exchange left Olivia feeling strangely buoyant. Forrest clearly had no interest in the banker's daughter, despite her obvious advantages of wealth and social position. It shouldn't have mattered to her, and yet it did. Later that afternoon, as they prepared to ride back to the ranch, Reverend Adams approached them. "Miss Owens, might I have a word?" Forrest nodded and moved away to check the horses, giving them privacy. "I wanted to let you know that I'll be riding out to your homestead next week to consecrate the graves properly," the Reverend said gently. "If you'd like to be present." Olivia swallowed hard. "Yes, I would, thank you." Forrest mentioned the anniversary of their passing is approaching. Sometimes marking these occasions with proper ceremony helps the healing process. She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in her throat. It had been nearly 3 months since the fever took her family, but some days the loss still felt as fresh as the day she had dug those graves herself. The Reverend patted her arm kindly. "You're doing well, Miss Owens. Your family would be proud of your strength." As they rode home, Olivia was quieter than usual, thinking about the upcoming ceremony. Forrest seemed to understand her need for silence, keeping his own counsel until they were nearly at the ranch. "I'll arrange to be free the day Reverend Adams consecrates the graves," he said quietly. "If you want company, that is." Olivia looked over at him, this man who somehow always knew what she needed before she asked. "I'd like that very much." The day of the consecration dawned clear and warm. Olivia wore her black dress, the one she had worn to bury her family for the first time since that terrible day. Martha had helped her clean and press it, and had woven wildflowers into Olivia's hair as a reminder that life continues even in the midst of remembering death. Forrest wore his Sunday clothes, his usually unruly hair slicked back, his manner solemn but supportive as they rode to the homestead. Reverend Adams met them there, his Bible in hand. The simple ceremony took place under the same merciless sun that had beaten down on Olivia as she dug those graves alone. But this time, she wasn't alone. Forrest stood beside her, his solid presence an anchor as the Reverend read from Scripture and blessed the graves. When it was time to place flowers on the mounds, now covered with summer grass, Olivia's legs trembled so badly she feared she might collapse. Without a word, Forrest offered his arm, supporting her as she laid wildflowers on each grave. "They're at peace now," Reverend Adams said gently when the ceremony concluded, "and they would want the same for you, my dear." The Reverend left shortly after, having another pastoral visit to make miles away. Olivia and Forrest remained by the graves, silent in the summer stillness. "I keep thinking I should feel different," Olivia finally said. "That after a proper burial the pain should ease." Forrest's hand found hers, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Grief doesn't work that way. It comes in waves. Some days the tide is out and you think you're healing. Other days it crashes over you again and you feel like you're drowning." She looked up at him, this man who understood loss so intimately. "Does it ever truly get better?" His blue eyes held her steadily. "It changes, becomes something you carry rather than something that carries you." He squeezed her hand. "And it helps to have someone who understands walking beside you." In that moment, standing beside her family's graves with Forrest's hand in hers, Olivia felt something shift within her heart. The grief didn't vanish, it would always be part of her. But alongside it now grew something new and hopeful, something that felt remarkably like love. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the homestead, not working as they usually did, but simply being. They sat on the porch Forrest had built, watching clouds drift across the vast Montana sky. They walked the boundaries of her land, Forrest pointing out its good features with a rancher's eye, and they talked of memories, of dreams, of possibilities. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, Forrest turned to her. "Olivia," he said, her name soft on his lips. "I've been wanting to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "Yes, the harvest dance is next month in town. Would you do me the honor of attending with me?" It wasn't what she had expected or perhaps secretly hoped for, but the invitation still sent warmth flooding through her. "I'd be delighted," she replied, smiling up at him. He returned her smile, relief evident in his expression. "Good, that's good." As they prepared to leave, Olivia took one last look at the graves on the hillside and the cabin below. For the first time, she could imagine a future here that wasn't shadowed entirely by loss. Perhaps someday there might be new life, new joy on this land her family had loved. The possibility no longer seemed like a betrayal, but rather a fulfillment of the dreams they had shared. August brought the busiest time at the Triple R, with preparations for the fall roundup consuming everyone's attention. Olivia saw less of Forrest during this period, as he was often out from dawn till dusk working with the cattle. Still, he made time each Sunday to escort her to church, and occasionally they would share a few quiet moments on the porch in the evenings. Martha noticed Olivia's wistful glances whenever Forrest rode out with the other cowhands. "He'll be back before dark," she would say with a knowing smile. "The man rides twice as hard these days just to get home to where you are. We're just friends," Olivia would insist, though the words rang increasingly hollow even to her own ears. "If you say so, dear," Martha would reply, her eyes twinkling. The truth was, Olivia had finally admitted to herself what her heart had known for weeks: she was falling in love with Forrest McCall. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. It seemed too soon after her family's deaths to find such happiness, and yet she couldn't deny the way her heart lifted whenever he was near. As the harvest dance approached, excitement built throughout the community. It would be the social event of the season, bringing in families from ranches and homesteads for miles around. Martha insisted on helping Olivia make a new dress for the occasion, a deep green that complemented her dark hair and fair skin. "Forrest won't be able to take his eyes off you," Martha declared as they finished the final fitting. Olivia blushed. "That's not why I'm going." "Of course not," Martha agreed, her smile knowing, "but it's a pleasant side effect, wouldn't you say?" The night of the dance arrived with perfect late summer weather, warm enough to open the doors of the town hall, but with a hint of autumn crispness in the air. Forrest arrived at the main house looking more nervous than Olivia had ever seen him, wearing his best clothes and with his hair carefully combed. when Olivia descended the stairs in her new dress. His expression made all the hours of sewing worthwhile. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, his blue eyes wide with appreciation. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering her a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You look very handsome yourself." Jacob cleared his throat loudly from the doorway. "If you two are done admiring each other, we should get going. Martha's been ready for 10 minutes. The ride to town was filled with anticipation. The main street was lit with lanterns, and the sound of fiddle music drifted from the town hall. Inside, the building had been transformed. Decorations of wheat sheaves and autumn flowers adorned the walls. Tables laden with food lined one side, and the center floor was cleared for dancing. It seemed the entire community had turned out for the celebration. Olivia recognized many faces now: the shopkeepers, the blacksmith, the families from church. They greeted her warmly, no longer as a stranger but as one of their own. "May I have this dance?" Forrest asked as the fiddle struck up a lively tune. Olivia placed her hand in his. "I should warn you, I haven't danced in years." His smile was warm as he led her onto the floor. "Neither have I, we can stumble together." But they didn't stumble. Forrest's strong hand at her waist guided her confidently through the steps, and soon they were moving in perfect harmony, as if they had danced together all their lives. Olivia found herself laughing with pure joy as they twirled among the other couples. "You lied," she accused breathlessly when the dance ended. "You dance beautifully." Forrest's eyes crinkled with amusement. "My mother insisted all her children learn, said it was a necessary social grace." "I shall have to thank her if we ever meet," Olivia replied. "I'd like that," he said softly, his expression suddenly serious. Before Olivia could respond to the implication of his words, Rebecca Simmons appeared at Forrest's elbow, resplendent in a burgundy dress that must have cost more than Olivia earned in 3 months. "Forrest, you promised me a dance," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes challenging as they swept over Olivia dismissively. To his credit, Forrest looked uncomfortable. "Did I? I don't recall." "Oh, you most certainly did," Rebecca insisted, placing a possessive hand on his arm. "At church last Sunday." Olivia stepped back, not wanting to cause a scene. "Go ahead, Forrest. I should check on Martha anyway." Before he could protest, she slipped away into the crowd, her earlier happiness dimmed. She found Martha at one of the refreshment tables, chatting with other ranch wives. "Already tired of dancing?" Martha asked, noting Olivia's expression. "Miss Simmons claimed Forrest for a dance," Olivia explained, trying to keep her voice neutral. Martha's eyes narrowed as she spotted Forrest on the dance floor, looking distinctly uncomfortable as Rebecca pressed herself closer than propriety allowed. "That girl never did understand the meaning of dignity," she muttered. "Don't you worry, dear. Forrest knows his own mind." Indeed, as soon as the dance ended, Forrest extricated himself from Rebecca's grasp and made his way determinedly toward Olivia. His expression brightened visibly when he spotted her. "There you are," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I was afraid you'd left and miss all this." Olivia gestured to the festive scene around them. "Not a chance." His smile returned. "Good, because I'm not letting anyone else claim you for a dance tonight." True to his word, Forrest remained by her side for the remainder of the evening. They danced until Olivia's feet ached pleasantly, shared slices of apple pie at the refreshment table, and even slipped outside briefly to admire the stars when the hall became too warm. Standing in the quiet darkness behind the town hall, the music muffled by distance, Olivia felt a sense of contentment she had not experienced since before her family's deaths. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "I hadn't realized how much I needed this." Forrest stood close beside her, his face shadowed but his eyes catching the distant lamplight. "Seeing you smile and laugh again, it's been worth everything." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Everything." "Olivia," he began, his voice low and serious, "I know it hasn't been long since we met, and you've been through so much. I don't want to rush you or presume anything, but I need you to know." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "You've brought light back into my life when I thought the darkness would last forever." She could barely breathe. "Forrest, you don't have to say anything," he rushed on. I just wanted you to know how I feel. After Eleanor died, I never thought I could care for someone again, but with you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. "With you, I remember what it's like to look forward to tomorrow." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of a different kind than those she had shed at 3 fresh graves. These were tears of hope, of possibility, of a future she hadn't dared imagine. "I feel the same," she whispered. "When I lost my family, I thought my heart died with them, but you've shown me it's still beating, still capable of joy." She placed her hand over his where it rested against her cheek. "Still capable of love." The word hung between them, fragile and precious. Forrest's eyes searched hers, seeking confirmation of what he had heard. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it was barely more than a whisper. Olivia closed her eyes, her heart soaring as she returned the kiss with all the newfound hope in her soul. When they finally parted, Forrest rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I think I've been waiting for you my whole life," he murmured, "even when I didn't know it." Inside the hall, the music had stopped, and the sound of applause broke the spell between them. Reality intruded. They were at a public gathering, and their absence would soon be noticed. "We should go back inside," Olivia said reluctantly. Forrest nodded, but before they moved, he took her hand in his. "Olivia, may I call on you properly? With your permission and the Richardsons' blessing," the formal request, so proper and old-fashioned, brought a smile to her lips. "Yes, Forrest, I would like that very much." They returned to the dance just as the last song was being announced. Forrest led Olivia onto the floor, and as they moved together to the slow, sweet melody, she felt as though they were the only 2 people in the room. His eyes never left hers, and in them she saw a future unfurling, one filled with love, with healing, with new beginnings. The weeks following the harvest dance were filled with a new kind of happiness for Olivia. True to his word, Forrest began courting her properly, with Jacob and Martha's enthusiastic blessing. Their weekly trips to her homestead took on a new dimension as they began to discuss possibilities for the land, not just maintenance, but true development. "The creek on your property would support a small herd of cattle," Forrest observed one crisp September afternoon as they walked the boundaries. "The soil in the lower field is good for growing hay. With some work, this could be a profitable small ranch." Olivia looked at him curiously. "You sound like you've given this a lot of thought." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly awkward. "Just thinking aloud." But she sensed there was more to it than that. Forrest had been unusually pensive lately, often lost in thought when he thought she wasn't looking. Several times, she had caught him in deep conversation with Jacob, the 2 men falling silent when she approached. The mystery was solved on a golden October day when Forrest asked Olivia to ride with him to her homestead, despite it not being their usual day to visit. The cabin looked different as they approached. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the windows gleamed in the autumn sunlight. "Someone's there," Olivia said, alarmed. Forrest merely smiled. "I asked the Richardsons to ride ahead of us. I wanted everything to be perfect." "Perfect for what?" she asked, completely confused now. He helped her dismount but kept hold of her hands. "Olivia, I've been planning this for weeks. I wanted to do it right." Understanding began to dawn. Olivia's heart raced as Forrest led her to the porch of the cabin her father had started and Forrest had finished, the cabin that represented her family's dreams. Martha and Jacob emerged from inside, both beaming. Martha had tears in her eyes as she hugged Olivia fiercely. "We'll give you 2 some privacy," she whispered, before she and Jacob mounted their horses and rode a discreet distance away. Alone with Forrest on the porch of what should have been her family home, Olivia felt a curious blend of past and future, grief and joy. "Olivia Owens," Forrest began, his voice steady despite the emotion clear in his eyes. "When I first saw you standing alone on this land, your tears falling over 3 fresh graves, I knew only that I wanted to help ease your pain. I never imagined you would end up healing mine as well." He took both her hands in his. "These past months with you have shown me that life can begin again after devastating loss, that hearts can mend and grow stronger in the broken places." Forrest sank to one knee, still holding her hands. "I love you, Olivia. I want to build a life with you here." on this land your family loved. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to fill this house with laughter and children and all the joy your family dreamed of when they came west." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks as he reached into his pocket and produced a simple gold ring. "Will you marry me, Olivia? Will you let me build a home where you'll never be alone again?" Through her tears, Olivia smiled a smile of pure, uncomplicated happiness. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Forrest, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then rose to his feet and gathered her into his arms. Their kiss was filled with promise, with dreams, with a future neither had dared imagine months before. When they finally parted, Forrest gestured toward the cabin door. "Would you like to see inside? I've been working on it whenever I could get away from the ranch." Hand in hand, they entered the cabin, no longer just a shell, but a home. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the main room. Forrest had built simple but beautiful furniture, a rocking chair by the fire, a table with chairs, shelves along one wall. On the table sat a vase of late wildflowers and a small feast prepared by Martha. But what brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes was the framed photograph on the mantel, her family portrait, taken just before they left Pennsylvania. Forrest had retrieved it from her few possessions and placed it in a position of honor. "They'll always be part of our home," he said softly, following her gaze. "Part of our family." Olivia turned to him, her heart so full she could barely speak. "I love you," she managed, the words wholly inadequate to express what she felt. Forrest's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "And I love you, more than I ever thought possible." Outside, Jacob and Martha waited patiently, giving the young couple time to savor their moment. When Olivia and Forrest finally emerged, their radiant faces told the story before they spoke a word. Martha burst into happy tears, embracing them both. "We're so happy for you. When's the wedding to be?" Forrest looked at Olivia questioningly. "Before winter sets in," he suggested. "Say a month from now." Olivia nodded, unable to think of a single reason to wait. "A month sounds perfect." Jacob clapped Forrest on the shoulder. "Well then, son, looks like you've got a lot of work to do to get this place ready for your bride." "We'll help," Martha added immediately. "The whole community will. Just wait until Reverend Adams hears the news." As they rode back to the Triple R, plans already being enthusiastically discussed, Olivia gazed back at the homestead, at the 3 crosses on the hillside and the cabin below. For the first time, she could look at that scene without being overcome by grief. The sorrow was still there, would always be there, but now it was balanced by joy, by hope, by love. Forrest, noticing her gaze, reined his horse closer to hers. "Are you all right?" She smiled at him, this man who had helped her find her way back to life. "More than all right. I was just thinking that they would approve my family, they would be happy for us." "I believe they would," he agreed softly. "And I promise you, Olivia, I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of both their approval and your love." As they rode toward the Triple R in the golden October light, Olivia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead would not always be easy. Life in the Montana Territory guaranteed that, but she would not walk it alone, and somehow that made all the difference. The month before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of activity. Word spread quickly throughout the community, and true to Martha's prediction, offers of help poured in from all directions. The women of Whispering Pines organized a quilting bee to create a wedding gift. The men of the Triple R, under Forrest's direction, finished the remaining details of the cabin and built a proper barn. Even Rebecca Simmons, after an initial period of cold silence, eventually offered her father's services to help the couple establish a bank account for their future ranch. Olivia divided her time between her duties at the Triple R, preparations for the wedding, and increasingly frequent visits to the homestead that would soon be her marital home. Forrest worked from dawn till dusk, splitting his time between his responsibilities as foreman and the endless tasks of establishing their future together. They saw less of each other than either would have liked, but each evening they would steal a few precious moments on the porch of the main house, sharing the day's events and strengthening the bond between them. "Are you nervous?" Forrest asked one such evening, a week before the wedding. About any of it, Olivia considered the question seriously. Not about marrying you, she said finally. That feels more right than anything has in a very long time, but sometimes I worry if I'm ready to be a rancher's wife, if I'm strong enough for the life we're choosing. Forrest's hand found hers in the darkness. You're the strongest person I know, Olivia Owens. You faced unimaginable loss and didn't break. You built a new life from the ashes of the old. There's nothing you can't do. His faith in her was humbling. With you beside me, I believe that might be true. The night before their wedding, a small gathering was held at the Triple R. Not quite a formal rehearsal dinner, such customs were often simplified on the frontier, but a chance for close friends to celebrate with the couple before the larger community event. Jacob stood to offer a toast, his usually gruff demeanor softened by emotion. When Olivia came to us, she was a young woman facing the darkest days of her life with courage few could muster. Forrest was a man who had known his own share of tragedy but never let it harden his heart. He raised his glass. Together, you remind us all that even in our deepest sorrows, love can find us again. Martha and I couldn't be prouder if you were our own children. There wasn't a dry eye at the table as glasses were raised. Martha, openly weeping, embraced them both. I wish you all the happiness in the world, my dears. Later, as Forrest prepared to leave propriety dictating, they spend their last night as single people apart. He drew Olivia into a quiet corner of the porch. This time tomorrow, you'll be my wife, he said softly, his eyes reflecting the starlight. And you'll be my husband, she replied, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. He touched her cheek gently. I keep thinking I'll wake up and find this has all been a dream, that I never rode to your homestead that day, never found you standing so brave and alone. Not a dream, she assured him, leaning into his touch, and after tomorrow, never alone again, either of us. His kiss was tender, full of promise and barely restrained passion. Until tomorrow then, Miss Owens, for the last time. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, a perfect November day with just enough warmth in the sun to take the edge off the autumn chill. The ceremony would be held at the homestead, beside the cabin that represented both past dreams and future hopes. Martha helped Olivia dress in the simple but elegant white gown they had sewn together. Her dark hair was arranged in soft curls, with a crown of late-blooming wildflowers woven through the strands. You look beautiful, Martha said, adjusting the flowers one last time. Like a true Montana bride. When they arrived at the homestead, Olivia was overwhelmed by the transformation. The yard had been swept clean, lanterns hung from tree branches, and rows of benches arranged before a simple arch covered with evergreen boughs. It seemed the entire community had turned out ranchers, townspeople, even travelers passing through who had heard about the celebration. Jacob, who would give the bride away in the absence of her father, waited for her at the edge of the gathering. His eyes misted as he saw her. Your father would be proud today, he said gruffly, offering his arm. Olivia's eyes drifted to the hillside where the three crosses stood. I like to think they're watching, she said softly. The fiddle player struck up a tune, and the assembled guests rose. At the end of the makeshift aisle beneath the arch stood Forrest and Reverend Adams. Forrest's eyes found hers immediately, and the love shining in them was so intense it nearly took her breath away. With Jacob at her side, Olivia walked toward her future, each step taking her further from the grief that had once consumed her, and closer to the joy that now defined her. When they reached the arch, Jacob placed her hand in Forrest's with solemn ceremony. Care for her well, son, he said, his voice thick with emotion. With my life, Forrest promised, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. Reverend Adams smiled at the assembled guests. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Forrest McCall and Olivia Owens in holy matrimony. Their journey to this moment has not been an easy one. Both have known profound loss and sorrow. Yet in finding each other, they have discovered that love can bloom even in the most unlikely soil, that joy can return even after the darkest night. As the Reverend spoke the familiar words of the ceremony, Olivia felt a sense of perfect rightness settle over her. This man, this place, This moment, all of it was exactly as it should be. When it came time for their vows, Forrest spoke with quiet conviction. Olivia, when I first saw you, you were standing beside 3 fresh graves, your tears watering the soil of a dream that seemed to have died. I made a silent promise that day to help build a home where you would never be alone again. His voice caught slightly. I renew that promise today, before God and these witnesses. I will be your partner, your protector, your friend, and your love for all the days of my life. Tears slipped down Olivia's cheeks as she spoke her own vows. Forrest, you came into my life when all seemed lost. You helped me find strength I didn't know I possessed and hope I thought had died with my family. Today, I promise to walk beside you through whatever life brings joy or sorrow, plenty or want, sickness or health. You will never be alone again, for my heart is forever yours. The exchange of rings, the pronouncement, the kiss that sealed their union all passed in a blur of emotion. And then, they were turning to face their friends and neighbors as Reverend Adams announced with evident pleasure. I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Forrest McCall. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables laden with food, music, dancing, and the warmth of community surrounded the newlyweds. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, Olivia found herself standing slightly apart from the festivities, gazing at the 3 crosses on the hillside. Forrest appeared at her side, his hand finding hers. "They're with us today," he said softly, understanding without words where her thoughts had gone. Olivia nodded, leaning against his solid strength. "I wish they could have known you. They would have loved you as I do. I wish that too." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But I believe they know somehow, and I believe they're at peace, knowing you're not alone." As darkness fell, the guests gradually departed, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Martha and Jacob were the last to leave, Martha fussing over final details until Jacob gently pulled her away. "Let the young folks be, woman," he said with fond exasperation. "They've got a life to start." Alone at last, Olivia and Forrest stood on the porch of their home, the home her father had begun and Forrest had completed. The home that would shelter their love and, God willing, the family they hoped to create together. "Welcome home, Mrs. McCall," Forrest said softly, lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight and the warmth of the fire Martha had built up before leaving. A new quilt, the handiwork of the women of Whispering Pines, lay across the bed in the small bedroom. Everything was simple but made with care and love. As Forrest set her gently on her feet, Olivia looked around at what they had built together, not just the physical structure, but the life it represented. A life risen from the ashes of grief, nurtured by love, and now blooming with possibility. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning to face her husband, his eyes darkened as he drew her into his arms. "You're perfect," he murmured, lowering his lips to hers. In the quiet of their wedding night, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their bodies expressing what words could only hint at the depth of their love, the promise of their future, the healing of past wounds. Later, lying in her husband's arms beneath the wedding quilt, Olivia listened to the sound of his heartbeat beneath her ear and felt a contentment so complete it brought tears to her eyes. "What is it, love?" Forrest asked, feeling the dampness against his chest. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she said softly. "How much has changed since that day you found me," his arms tightened around her. "And how much is still to come, our whole lives together, Olivia, just beginning." The winter of 1876-1877 was one of the harshest in memory. Snow piled in drifts taller than a man, and temperatures plunged so low that even the creek on the McCall property froze solid. But inside their snug cabin, Olivia and Forrest created a haven of warmth and love. They settled into the rhythms of married life with surprising ease. Forrest continued his work as foreman at the Triple R, riding out each day when weather permitted and returning home each night to Olivia. She kept their home, learned the intricacies of ranch management from Martha, and began planning for spring planting. Christmas brought their first real celebration as a couple. They decorated the cabin with pine boughs and berries, and Olivia baked special treats from recipes Martha had shared. On Christmas Eve, despite the bitter cold, they bundled up to visit the graves on the hillside, leaving small wreaths on each. "Merry Christmas, Papa, Mama, James," Olivia said softly, her breath visible in the frigid air. "I wish you could see how happy I am." Forrest stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "I promise I'm taking good care of her," he added, speaking to the crosses as naturally as if addressing living people. "And I thank you for raising such an extraordinary woman." The new year brought news that filled their home with even greater joy. Olivia was expecting a child. When the doctor in Whispering Pines confirmed what she had begun to suspect, Forrest's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our baby." The shadow of his past loss crossed his face briefly, the wife and child he had lost years before. Olivia covered his hand with her own. "This child will be healthy and strong," she said with conviction, "and so will I." He met her eyes, love and fear mingled in his gaze. "I couldn't bear to lose you, Olivia." "You won't," she promised. "We're going to grow old together, surrounded by children and grandchildren, you'll see." As winter gave way to spring, Olivia's body changed with the season, new life growing within her as the land around them renewed itself. Forrest became even more protective, insisting she rest frequently and enlisting Martha's help to ensure she didn't overexert herself. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Olivia would protest, though secretly she treasured his concern. "Humor me," he would reply, pressing a kiss to her forehead. By summer, her condition was evident to all. The community embraced the news with enthusiasm, women offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, men helping Forrest build a cradle and other furnishings for the nursery. On a warm August evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Olivia felt the baby move within her with particular vigor. Taking Forrest's hand, she placed it where their child kicked energetically. "Strong," he murmured, his face softening with wonder. "Like its mother." Olivia leaned against him, contentment washing over her. "What shall we name the baby? We should decide soon." Forrest was quiet for a moment, his hand still resting on her rounded belly. "If it's a boy, I was thinking Thomas, after your father, Thomas Jacob McCall." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes at the thoughtfulness of his suggestion. "That's perfect. And if it's a girl," he met her gaze, his blue eyes serious. "Sarah Eleanor, for both our mothers." The suggestion honoring both the mother she had lost and the wife he had grieved touched Olivia deeply. "Yes," she whispered. "That would be beautiful." As her time grew near, Martha came to stay with them, her experience invaluable as Olivia prepared for the birth. Forrest grew increasingly anxious, his fear of losing her as he had lost Eleanor evident despite his attempts to hide it. The night before Martha's predicted due date, Olivia found him standing at the window, staring out at the darkness, his body tense with worry. "Forrest," she called softly, "come to bed." He turned, and in the lamplight she could see the fear in his eyes. Crossing to him, she took his hands in hers. "I need you to believe with me," she said firmly. "Believe that tomorrow will bring joy, not sorrow. Believe that our love is stronger than fear." Forrest drew her into his arms, careful of her swollen belly. "I do believe," he murmured against her hair. "But I'm still afraid." "That's all right," she assured him. "Just don't let the fear steal our joy." Sarah Eleanor McCall arrived just after dawn the next day, announcing her presence with lusty cries that filled the cabin with the most beautiful sound Olivia had ever heard. Martha delivered the baby expertly, while Forrest paced outside until the infant's cries signaled all was well. When he was finally allowed in, the sight that greeted him stole his breath. Olivia, tired but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in the softest blanket Martha had been able to find. "Come meet your daughter," Olivia said softly, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Forrest approached the bed with reverent steps, sinking down beside his wife and child. When Olivia placed the baby in his arms, his hands trembled. "She's perfect," he whispered, gazing down at the tiny face red and wrinkled with a dusting of dark hair like her mother's. "Hello, Sarah Eleanor, I'm your papa." As if recognizing her name, the baby's eyes opened blue as the Montana sky, just like her father's. Forrest's own eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said to Olivia, his voice choked with emotion. For our daughter, for our life, for everything. Martha slipped quietly from the room, leaving the new family to their private joy. Forrest settled beside Olivia on the bed, cradling both his wife and daughter in his strong arms. I was so afraid, he admitted, pressing a kiss to Olivia's damp hair. But you were right. Love is stronger than fear. Olivia looked up at her husband, then down at their daughter, this miraculous new life they had created together. Look how far we've come, she murmured. From that day by 3 fresh graves to this moment with new life in our arms. Forrest followed her gaze to their child, his expression one of wonder and profound gratitude. A full circle, he agreed softly, from tears of grief to tears of joy. As the morning sun streamed through the windows of the cabin, Forrest had built for her the home where she would never be alone again. Olivia felt the last shadows of her grief lift completely. The love she had lost would always be part of her, carried in her heart and honored in her memories. But the love she had found with Forrest, and now with their daughter, was her future bright with promise, rich with possibility, and boundless in its capacity for joy. On the hillside above, 3 crosses stood in silent witness to the unfolding story below, a story of loss transformed by love, of endings that became beginnings, of tears that watered the soil where new dreams took root and flourished.